There's a moment in Season 5 when Vecna freezes, when Max descends deeper into the cave, searching for answers, searching for the source of his power. Vecna's composure shatters, his confidence crumbles. For the first time, we see him afraid, truly afraid, not of Max, not of the Hawkins crew, but of the cave itself, of the darkness within those stone walls, of the memories that those caverns hold. But why? Why would a being of such immense power, a creature that has terrorized an entire town, a force that has bent reality itself to his will, why would he fear a cave? The answer lies in his past, in a moment decades ago when Henry Creel was just a boy, lost in the Nevada caves for over 12 hours, a moment that changed everything, a moment when he first encountered the entity that would eventually consume him entirely, a moment when he made contact with the Mind Flayer itself. And now, as Max ventures deeper into those same depths, Vecna's greatest fear is being realized. The cave is calling him back to the beginning, back to the origin of everything he's become. Henry Creel was a child when it happened, a boy who didn't quite fit in, who felt different from everyone around him, who struggled with the world that never seemed to understand him. One day, he ventured into the Nevada caves. Perhaps he was running away, perhaps he was exploring. The details don't matter. What matters is that he disappeared into those caves and vanished for over 12 hours. When he emerged, he was changed. Fundamentally, irreversibly changed. His blood type had been altered. His body bore the marks of something otherworldly. But more than that, his mind had been touched. His personality had shifted. Something had happened to him in those caves. Something that would define the rest of his life. The official story was that he'd gotten lost, that he'd wandered the caves alone and somehow found his way back. But the truth was far more sinister. Henry hadn't been alone in those caves. He hadn't been lost in the traditional sense. He had been found by something that existed in a dimension beyond our own, found by an entity that would change his entire existence. He had made contact with the Mind Flayer. Imagine being a child in complete darkness. Imagine being lost in caverns so deep, so ancient, that sunlight has never touched their walls. Imagine the cold, the isolation, the overwhelming sense that you are utterly, completely alone. And then imagine that you're not alone. Imagine feeling a presence in that darkness. Something vast, something intelligent, something that exists in a dimension just beyond your perception. This is what Henry experienced in the Nevada caves. As he wandered deeper into the stone labyrinth, the barrier between dimensions began to thin. The upside down, or what the first shadow calls Dimension X, began to bleed through. And in that liminal space, in that moment when two worlds touched, Henry encountered the Mind Flayer. It wasn't a creature in the traditional sense. It wasn't something with a face, or a voice, or a recognizable form. It was a presence, a consciousness, an entity so vast and so alien that the human mind could barely comprehend it. It was ancient, it was hungry, it was aware, and it had been waiting in the darkness for a very long time. When the Mind Flayer touched Henry, it was like nothing he had ever experienced. The contact was physical and psychic simultaneously. It invaded his mind while it rewrote his body. It showed him visions of worlds beyond his understanding. It revealed to him the existence of dimensions he never knew existed. And in that moment of contact, something fundamental changed within him. The entity didn't just touch him, it attached itself to him. A part of the Mind Flayer's consciousness anchored itself to Henry's being, creating a bond that would never be severed. Henry was no longer entirely human. He was no longer entirely himself. He had become something else, a hybrid, a vessel, a conduit for something far greater and far more terrible than he could have imagined. And in that moment, in that first contact in the darkness of the Nevada caves, Henry Creel's childhood ended. His transformation had begun. When Henry emerged from the Nevada caves, the physical evidence of his transformation was undeniable. His blood type had changed, not gradually, not over time, but fundamentally, as if the very composition of his body had been rewritten at a cellular level. Doctors examined him, tests were run, the results were inexplicable. Henry's biology no longer matched any known human classification. He had been altered by something beyond medical science's understanding, but the physical transformation was only the beginning. With the Mind Flayer's touch came something far more significant: psychic abilities. Henry could sense things that others couldn't. He could perceive the thoughts and emotions millions of people around him. He could move objects with his mind. He could see into the spaces between dimensions. Powers that should have been impossible. Powers that marked him as fundamentally different from every other human being on Earth. And then there was the personality change. The Henry who emerged from those caves was not the same boy who had entered them. Something in his demeanor had shifted. Something in his eyes had changed. He was colder now, more distant, more calculating. The entity that had attached itself to him was influencing his thoughts, his emotions, his very sense of self. The Mind Flayer's consciousness was bleeding into his own, altering who he was at the most fundamental level. His parents noticed the change immediately. His mother saw it in the way he looked at her. His father sensed it in the coldness of his presence. Henry was still their son, but he was also something else now, something other, something that carried within it a piece of an alien consciousness that did not belong in this world. The transformation wasn't complete yet, but it had begun, and with every passing day, with every moment that the Mind Flayer's influence grew stronger, Henry Creel was becoming less human, and more something else entirely. He was becoming Vecna. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Here's where Henry's tragedy becomes truly unbearable, because Henry wasn't in control. He never was. The Mind Flayer didn't attach itself to him as an equal. It didn't merge with him as a partner. It claimed him as a servant. Think of it like Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine. Vader believed he was powerful. He believed he was in control, but he was always serving a master, always subordinate to a greater force, always dancing to the tune of someone or something far more powerful than himself. And that's exactly what happened to Henry Creel. The psychic abilities that Henry developed, the powers that made him feel special and unique and different from everyone else, those weren't gifts, they were tools. The Mind Flayer was cultivating them, developing them, preparing Henry to be the perfect instrument for its will. Every power Henry gained was another chain binding him to the entity. Every ability he developed was another way the Mind Flayer could control him. And Henry, as a child and then as a teenager, didn't fully understand this dynamic. He thought he was becoming something great. He thought he was evolving beyond human limitations. He thought the powers were his to command, but the truth was far more sinister. The Mind Flayer was the master. Henry was the servant, and the entity had no intention of ever releasing its grip on him. The realization must have been devastating. To understand gradually that the entity inside you isn't your partner or your ally, it's your owner. It doesn't care about Henry's dreams or his desires or his sense of self. It only cares about using him, about bending him to its purposes, about making him into the perfect vessel for its will. Henry Creel had been claimed by something far greater than himself, and he would spend the rest of his life, or what remained of it, serving that master, whether he wanted to or not. Years passed. Henry grew older. He learned to hide what he was. He learned to suppress his powers, to blend in, to pretend to be normal, even as the Mind Flayer's consciousness churned inside him. He went to school. He had a family. He tried desperately to maintain some semblance of a normal life, but it was all a lie, all a performance, because the entity inside him was always there, always present, always whispering, always demanding, and Henry was always fighting against it, trying to maintain some core of himself that remained untouched by the darkness. Then came the night that changed everything. The night when Henry discovered something that would shatter whatever remained of his hope. He was using his psychic abilities, abilities he'd learned to control, abilities that had become second nature to him, and he reached out through the void. He spied on his mother. He watched her through the barriers between dimensions, seeing her in her private moments, hearing her thoughts and her conversations, and what he heard destroyed him. His mother was talking to Dr. Brenner. She was telling him that Henry was dangerous, that something was wrong with him, that he needed to be locked away, that they should throw away the key and never let him out. His own mother, the woman who had given birth to him, who had raised him, who was supposed to love him unconditionally, was asking for him to be imprisoned forever. In that moment, something inside Henry broke. The last thread of his humanity snapped. The final barrier between Henry Creel and the darkness inside him crumbled. He had been fighting so hard to remain himself, to resist the Mind Flayer's influence, to hold on to his humanity. But if his own mother saw him as a monster, if the people closest to him wanted him locked away and forgotten, then what was the point of fighting anymore? What was the point of being Henry Creel at all? On the night of the Creel murders, Henry made a choice. Or perhaps it wasn't a choice at all. Perhaps it it was inevitability. The line between the two had become so blurred that it no longer mattered. Henry stopped fighting. He opened himself completely to the entity that had been living inside him since that day in the Nevada caves. He let the darkness consume him. But the true transformation, the true birth of Vecna, didn't happen that night. It happened later. It happened when Eleven discovered what Henry had become, when she realized the danger he posed, when she made the decision to stop him. Using her powers, Eleven created a portal. She sent Henry through it, back to Dimension X, back to his roots. Back to the place where the Mind Flayer was waiting, back to the darkness where it all began. And in that moment, Henry Creel ceased to exist. Vecna was born, but the details are hazy. Henry's memory of what happened in Dimension X, of what transpired in that alien realm, is fragmented and unclear. He remembers the cold. He remembers the presence of something vast and ancient. He remembers the sensation of being unmade and remade simultaneously, but the specifics are lost to him, obscured by something or someone who wanted those memories hidden. What remains is not memory, but sensation, a dark sense of power that looms over everything, a presence that is always there, always watching, always waiting. The Mind Flayer's consciousness is no longer just attached to him, it is him. They are one. And though Henry's memories of that transformation are blocked off, though the details remain hazy, the truth is undeniable. Vecna is what emerged from Dimension X, and he has never forgotten where he came from. Dimension X is his origin, his birthplace, his source, and it terrifies him, because deep down, in the parts of his memory that remain accessible, he knows what waits for him there. He knows what the Mind Flayer wants, and he knows he cannot resist. So when Max descends into that cave in Season 5, when she ventures deeper into the darkness searching for answers, Vecna's entire being recoils. The cave isn't just a physical location, it's a gateway, it's a reminder, it's a trigger that sends his nervous system into complete shutdown, because that cave mirrors Dimension X, the darkness, the cold, the ancient alien presence that seems to exist in the very stone itself, and Vecna's body, his nervous system, his psychic consciousness, cannot handle it. He literally cannot go further. He cannot face the place of his origin, he cannot confront the source of his transformation. This is Vecna's greatest weakness. Not a sword, not a spell, not a hero's courage, but the memory of what he is, the knowledge of where he came from, the terrifying realization that the Mind Flayer is still waiting in Dimension X, still calling to him, still demanding his return. Max is searching for why Vecna fears the cave, and the answer is simple. He fears it because it's the only place where he's truly powerless. The only place where the darkness he's tried to control becomes the darkness that controls him.